What would you trade for eternal youth? Your reputation? Your loved ones? Or your very soul? In Victorian London, a man makes this ultimate bargain, only to find that while his face remains untouched by time, a hidden canvas is rotting with the sins of his life. 1. Introduction and the Innocent Dawn. The story opens in the luxurious, flower-scented studio of Basil Hallward, a talented and deeply moral artist in Victorian London. Basil is putting the finishing touches on his absolute masterpiece, a full-length oil portrait of a breathtakingly beautiful young aristocrat named Dorian Gray. Dorian represents the epitome of youth, innocence, and physical perfection. While Basil is working, his friend Lord Henry Wotton stops by. Lord Henry is a charismatic, cynical nobleman who champions the philosophy of hedonism, the belief that the pursuit of pleasure, beauty, and sensual fulfillment is the only true purpose of human life. Basil initially tries to keep Lord Henry away from Dorian, fearing that Henry's corrupting, radical ideas will ruin the young man's pure nature. However, the meeting is inevitable. When Dorian arrives, he is instantly captivated by Lord Henry's brilliant, dangerous eloquence. Henry warns Dorian that his youth and beauty are fleeting treasures that will soon fade into ugly old age. Looking at Basil's completed portrait, Dorian experiences a sudden, terrifying realization of his own mortality. In a fit of passionate despair, Dorian cries out a fateful wish. If it were I who was to be always young, and the picture that was to grow old. For that, I would give everything. I would give my soul for that. 2. The inciting incident and the first scar. Influenced by Lord Henry's philosophy, Dorian begins to explore the hedonistic lifestyle of London. He falls deeply in love with Sybil Vane, a young, immensely talented actress performing in a run-down theater in the slums. Sybil, living in a world of poverty, views Dorian as her Prince Charming. For Dorian, however, her beauty is inextricably linked to her artistic talent on stage. When Dorian invites Basil and Lord Henry to watch Sybil perform Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, tragedy strikes. Having experienced real love with Dorian, Sybil can no longer fake passion on stage. Her performance is lifeless and terrible. Cruel and disappointed, Dorian brutally rejects her after the show, telling her she has killed his love and that she is nothing to him without her art. He returns home to his grand house alone. The next morning, Dorian looks at Basil's portrait and notices a horrifying change. A faint, cruel sneer has formed around the painted lips. Shortly after, Lord Henry arrives with shocking news. Sybil Vane has committed suicide by drinking poison. While Dorian initially feels a wave of horror and guilt, Lord Henry quickly rationalizes the tragedy, convincing Dorian to view Sybil's death merely as a beautiful, dramatic play. Dorian realizes his wish has been granted. The portrait will bear the burden of his age and sins, while his physical body remains flawlessly young. He locks the painting away in an abandoned attic, hidden from the eyes of the world. 3. The descent into darkness, the rising action. Years pass, but time stands still for Dorian Gray. Over the next 18 years, Dorian sinks deeper into a life of unchecked indulgence, cruelty, and sin. Guided by a mysterious French yellow book given to him by Lord Henry, Dorian travels through the highest high society salons by day and the filthiest opium dens of London by night. He becomes a patron of the arts, collecting rare perfumes, exotic jewels, and fine tapestries to distract his mind. Yet, his true obsession remains the hidden portrait in his attic. Every so often, he creeps upstairs to unlock the door and stare at the canvas. The transformation is monstrous. While Dorian's face remains that of an innocent 20-year-old angel, the portrait grows wrinkled, bloated, and grotesque. Every act of cruelty leaves a line of malice. Every betrayal adds a sickening look of corruption. Rumors begin to shadow Dorian's name in London. Young men and women who associate with him find their reputations ruined and their lives destroyed. Yet Dorian remains untouchable because of his innocent, youthful appearance. 4. The climax, a crimson stain. On the eve of his 38th birthday, Dorian runs into Basil Hallward on a foggy London street. Basil is about to leave for Paris, but wanted to confront Dorian about the terrible rumors surrounding his morality. Basil begs Dorian to deny the stories, stating that he cannot judge his soul because only God can see the soul. In a moment of dark pride and rage, Dorian decides to show Basil the truth. He leads the artist up to the dusty attic and pulls back the curtain hiding the portrait. Basil gasps in absolute horror. He can barely recognize his own masterpiece beneath the hideous, rotting face on the canvas. Seeing Basil's horror and feeling a sudden wave of irrational hatred for the man who painted the picture, Dorian grabs a knife and brutally stabs Basil in the neck until he dies. To cover up the murder, Dorian blackmails an old friend, a brilliant chemist named Alan Campbell. Using threats of exposure regarding a past secret, Dorian forces Alan to use chemicals to completely dissolve Basil's body into ash. Overwhelmed by guilt, Alan Campbell later commits suicide. When Dorian returns to the attic, he notices that the hands of the grotesque figure in the portrait are now dripping with a fresh, wet crimson stain, the blood of his creator. 5. The falling action and vengeance. Dorian tries to flee his conscience by drowning his mind in drugs. He visits a dangerous opium den on the London docks. There, he is recognized by James Vane, Sybil Vane's vengeful brother, who has spent nearly 2 decades searching for the man who caused his sister's death. James corners Dorian in a dark alley and threatens to shoot him. Dorian saves his life through a clever deception. He tells James to look at his face under the street lamp. Seeing a flawless, young 20-year-old man, James realizes this person looks far too young to be the man who broke his sister's heart 18 years ago. James lets him go, apologizing for the mistake. However, an old woman in the alley later informs James that Dorian Gray hasn't aged a single day in 20 years due to a devilish bargain. James Vane begins stalking Dorian, hunting him down at his country estate. Dorian lives in absolute terror, fainting with fear during a house party. However, fate intervenes. During a weekend shooting party on the estate, a guest accidentally shoots and kills a man hiding in the bushes. When Dorian checks the body, he discovers it is James Vane. His stalker is dead and Dorian is safe once more, but his mind is completely fractured. 6. Resolution. The final stroke. Dorian decides he wants to change. He attempts a deliberate act of goodness by sparing the heart of a young country girl he was courting, choosing to leave her rather than corrupt her. Hoping this moral act has restored some beauty to the portrait, he takes the key and goes up to the attic. Instead of improvement, Dorian finds that the portrait looks even more hypocritical and loathsome. He realizes that his good deed was driven purely by vanity and a selfish desire to save himself. The portrait laughs at his hypocrisy. Realizing that his confession will never happen and that the painting is the only living witness to his crimes, Dorian looks at the knife he used to murder Basil. He decides to destroy the canvas and break free from his past. He seizes the knife and plunges it deep into the heart of the portrait. A terrible cry echoes through the house, so loud that the servants and passing policemen tremble with fear. When the servants finally break into the locked room, they find a magnificent portrait hanging on the wall, showing their master exactly as they had always known him, in the radiant splendor of his exquisite youth and beauty. On the floor beneath it lies the body of a dead man in evening dress, with a knife stabbed into his heart. His face is withered, wrinkled, and utterly loathsome with age and sin. It is only by checking the rings on his fingers that they are able to recognize him as Dorian Gray.